Okay, we're going to begin. So this is the League of Women Voters Candidate Forum. The League of Tulsa wants to host a number of these forums throughout the month of June. We think it's important that people get involved in the election process. So this is tonight, June 13th, 6 to 7:30 p.m., 17th, I'm sorry. Our invited candidates tonight, 5 of the 6 invited candidates here tonight. So Dan Hicks, Matthew Lee, Melissa Provenzano, Teresa Marler, and Brian Pingleton. So let's give them a round of applause for being brave enough to run for office. We want to invite everyone to write questions around the audience. We have league members here with pieces of paper. They're trying to show for questions from the audience. We'll ask your questions. If the questions are similar in nature, we may combine them. So it may be like your exact wording, but they'll be the same sentiment, we hope, as well. So we should have plenty of time. The candidates are going to have 2-minute openings, 2-minute closings, 1-minute answers. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce our president, Elizabeth Harris, to talk about the league briefly.
We usually put this part at the end, but people kept walking out on me. It hurt my feelings. So Michael moved it to the beginning for me. So my name's Elizabeth Harris. I'm the president of the Tulsa League. The league in Tulsa has a really long history. We've been around since 1923, which is about 3 years after the National League of Women Voters came about, after women's right to vote was legally recognized in the U.S. We like to say that it wasn't given, it wasn't fought for, it was recognized because we always had it. Recently, the league, we do allow male members. We bring Michael along to these to show that we do have men on our board. We do allow men members. Really the only requirement to be a local league member is that you live in Tulsa metro area-ish. We do have members who have moved away. What the league is really about is engaging, educating, and advocating on behalf of voters in Tulsa. We're non-biased, we're non-party related, we're not bipartisan, we're nonpartisan. You will never hear us say you should vote for this candidate, you should vote for that candidate. It's more, you should vote and here's the information. So that's what today is about, is to be able to say that you as community members have been able to ask your questions directly to your potential elected officials. The other thing that we do is vote411.org, which you can get your personalized sample ballot. All of the candidates have been asked to answer questions. We don't edit those, so whatever they sent us is what is on vote411.org. All of their typos and grammatical errors, we don't edit for any of those, so it's exactly what we're sent, so that you can be sure that we're not, manipulating it in that way. This is my least favorite part of being president, is the part where I talk about we are completely volunteer run. We are completely funded by donations and memberships. So if you are interested in what the league does around Tulsa, the state, or across the U.S., please come ask one of our volunteers. Check out our website or Facebook and see what we're all about, and see if you want to be a volunteer. We're always looking for people to help with these kinds of events, with voter forums, for registration events, anything like that. Whatever you are interested in doing, we will find a place for you. If you're just interested in writing a check, we will also find a place for that. So please check us out and keep us in mind as we move through this midterm election. We have elections coming up next week. We have city elections and runoffs in August, and then we have November. So it's going to be a very, very busy year for us. So please keep us in mind. And voting the 26th. Also early voting, which Michael's going to talk about. I just wanted to share that I'm really excited because my birthday is Saturday and I get to vote on my birthday, which is kind of like the greatest thing ever for someone like me. So just because you're not going to be in town on the 26th doesn't mean you can't vote. So, Michael.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's review the format for tonight. We'll be using the League of Women Voters guidelines, which are that this is not a debate, this is a forum. All questions will be asked to all the candidates. So we've asked for questions from the audience. There are people running around with pieces of paper and pencils if you need one as well to give us questions. We reserve the right to combine questions, so many of these are, and if they're for one candidate, they probably will not be asked. We want to make sure all the candidates have this answer as well. So we're going to have 2-minute openings from each of the candidates, 1-minute answers, and then 2-minute closings. We have a timekeeper. Sarah Ivey's here. I recommend the candidates be afraid of her, so when she flashes that stop sign, please stop as well. So, and I do also want to say to the candidates that this is not time for rebuttals and attacks. Try to stay in the moment and answer these questions. There's some very good ones that have come in here as well so far. So we did draw for numbers to see who would go first, and Brian Pingleton drew first, so you'll have 2 minutes for opening. Mr. Pingleton.
My name is Brian Pingleton, and there's a few things that I think this conversation is really about. First thing is, for far too long, Oklahoma has been putting profit over people with decades of massive tax. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you very much. With decades of massive tax cuts, we have very little to show for it. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? The other thing is. We're lacking representation at the Capitol. And people are frustrated. People are upset. And I think that we need regular folks to represent this community, someone who has advocated for education and healthcare, and someone who's experienced in the issues that our state faces. I myself, I have advocated for people my entire career, most notably now as a realtor, and recently as in education and healthcare. I have kids in public school still, and I've been involved in their education there from the day one. I have been on the PTA Council, and I've also served on Project Schoolhouse Advisory Council, where I stood up for teachers and students to make sure that they receive equitable trade-ups. I was also a nursing home administrator, where I'm very familiar with the problems facing healthcare and mental health care. With the education budgets being cut 28% over the last decade, mental health care being historically underfunded, it's time to take the state back. It's time to stand together and make things right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hicks, your 2 minutes.
I'm going to stand up, and hopefully that'll help you hear me better. I'm Dan Hicks, and I'm a conservative Republican, and I've been going door to door, and there's about 4 things that I'm hearing from voters at the door in our district. They want 4 things. They want good roads, infrastructure, good bridges. They want safe and efficient law enforcement. They want a vibrant, growing economy. Now, that's not really a role of government, but government can get out of the way and let that happen. And then they want quality schools and a quality education for our kids. Those are about the 4 things that I hear door to door. And we'll be talking about some of that as we go on. But let me introduce you to my family. My lovely wife is here. This is Karen. We've been married 32 years as of June 14th. And we'll have to celebrate that a little later. We've been very busy. I have 3 children in college. My daughter Abby goes to Oklahoma Baptist. She's a nursing student and is also on the varsity soccer team. My son Sawyer just graduated from Arkansas. And my son Tanner is 27, and he had a painting in the recent designer showcase. He's an artist type. What I do professionally, I'm a designer in architecture firm. That's what I've done for the last 30 years. And we've designed schools, churches. We did the Bluebell ice cream plant. My boss, Wally Wisencraft, is 91 years old and still practicing architecture. And he is, he's a scout leader, so we did a lot of work for the Boy Scouts. I've always been involved in grassroots politics, worked a long time trying to help conservatives get elected, and so that's sort of my background in politics. I'm an outsider. This is my first race, and I look forward to representing this district.
Thank you. Mr. Lee.
I think I'll stand as well, just to make sure everyone can hear me. All right. My name is Matthew Lee. I'm a Republican running for this House seat. It's also my first election. We have many issues facing our state. Our prison system locks up more people per capita than anywhere else in the entire world. And not just the entire United States, the entire world, including countries like Saudi Arabia and North Korea. We have an underfunded and overburdened education system that desperately needs more money. We need more money and better teachers. We need more teachers, better facilities, so we can give our kids the education they deserve. And with that education, soon they'll be able to go into the economy and make Oklahoma have it and create a better economy in Oklahoma. I think we can have it. I think the government can help the economy grow. We can offer tax incentives for companies to move here, to bring better, higher paying jobs in the tech sector, moving away from blue collar jobs and bringing in more white collar jobs, the jobs of tomorrow's economy. Also, we need to have better public transit. We have a public transit system that is almost non-existent. I think with public transit, we can bring people from lower income neighborhoods and get them to jobs that are better and higher paying. And hopefully through improved opportunities in education, we can improve the state's economy and we can move our state forward. And hopefully tonight you'll hear some of my positions on those issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Provenzano.
I am Melissa Provenzano. I'm an educator who started as a biology teacher here at Will Rogers High School. I taught biology, zoology, anatomy, physiology, all those ologies that you were forced to take at the secondary level in high school. Several years later, I moved into administration and have served in that capacity for the last 9 years. So I've worked the classroom end as well as the business end of running a school and working within a district. About a month and a half now, I had one of my best teachers come to me and let me know that he was resigning and moving to Texas for $12,000 more a year. All I could say was, I can't blame you, and I wish you well. A few weeks ago, one of my peers was taking a mini vacation to Branson, and as they crossed the Arkansas state line, there's a big sign there now that says, Oklahoma teachers, we're hiring. So, pardon me, education reform by any means is not the only issue that we have in Oklahoma, but it's the bedrock of a healthy community and the true issue from which all others spring forth. What's motivated me to run is the realization that we as Oklahomans are not so far apart in our values and our beliefs. During the teacher walkout back in April, as I stood on the Capitol lawn and as I lobbied our senators and our representatives to fully fund education, I still am profoundly moved by the level of support we receive from community agencies, churches, big business and small business alike with food, support, gas cards, whatever we needed. They opened their doors to take our children. I realize this is not a Democratic or Republican issue, but it's an Oklahoma issue. And I feel it's time to take that supportive leadership to the citizens of House District 79.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Marlin.
Hi, my name's Teresa Marler. I obviously have a little bit more voice that carries a little better, I guess. I don't know. Everybody else seems a little quiet. I ran in 2016. It was the first time that, since Weldon Watson ran, that he had an opponent that went to the general. So I gave everybody in House District 79 the chance to choose who they wanted. I ended up receiving 35% of the vote as an independent, newcomer to politics. I was motivated to run in 2016 by Bernie Sanders. He gave me the, kind of opened my eyes to what was going on around me and made me realize that I could do something to help make my community better and make Oklahoma better as a whole. Since I ran in 2016, I worked with Together Oklahoma, which is part of Oklahoma Policy Institute. I helped with getting people involved, helping them to, learn how to talk to their legislators, helping them to figure out who their legislators were. I also have a daughter in elementary school, which we need a lot more help there, and we'll get into that discussion some more, I'm sure, tonight. I would like to obviously I'm not a public speaker. I would like to just be here and represent everybody.
Okay, thank you very much. That was our opening statements. Now we're going to the questions. And remember, there are people around the room with 3x5 cards. We've got some good questions in, but keep them coming in as well. So we'll begin this, and these are 1-minute answers. And don't feel compelled to spend the whole minute if you have a good answer. So we get more questions in tonight as well. So Mr. Pickington, we'll begin with you. Most of you, or all of you, have probably met with many teachers during this campaign. Have any of your views changed while campaigning about teachers?
Have any of
Your views about teachers or education changed after listening?
Absolutely not. I have 4 kids in public school, and they've been in school for quite a few years, and I've been highly involved with their education, so I'm constantly in touch with the teachers, my kids' teachers in the school, the principal, the staff, and I've been very familiar with what's plaguing our education system for many, many years. I myself went to Tulsa Public Schools and Union Public Schools, so I'm very familiar with all of that. I think the state did a lot of good things with the recent legislation that passed, but it's not enough. It's not nearly enough. We need to double up on pretty much everything that was passed, in my opinion. We need to put teachers at the forefront of our society and put them on a high ground and high esteem level.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hicks?
I don't think my position has changed. My position on education is this. I believe teachers should be paid as the professionals they are, and I think we can achieve that by streamlining administrative function, controlling spending, and I believe we can do it without raising taxes. I'm quite encouraged about the strong recovery we're having. We're $500 million ahead. Actually, when the teacher strike was going on, we are $500 million ahead of where we were last year. The legislature, if they chose to, could have funded the teacher pay raise right from the general fund. By the end of the year, that's expected to be about $1 billion, so I'm very encouraged. One thing I notice at the door is a lot of teachers don't realize that 52% of the appropriations already go to education. And a lot of times they'll give an answer like 6% or something like that. So I'm finding that a lot of them misunderstand the amount of money that is going to education.
Thank you. Mr. Lee?
My views have not changed on teachers during this campaign because the fundamental problem has still not changed. We just need to make more progress in fixing the fundamental problem. We need more funding in our classrooms. We need to do that so we can attract better teachers. Raising salaries is a way we can do that. We need to give them new and better textbooks. We are going to need more revenue to do it. Some of that revenue can be achieved through streamlining the process and the bureaucracy, but some of it's going to have to come from taxes. And we need to be, education does consume over 50% of the general budget. It does in every state. And we need to give more funding of outslash and other core services like Medicaid.
Thank you.
I spend all of my time with teachers, and my views on teachers have strengthened. They are collaborative in nature. They've been driving me to the doors. They've been knocking on doors, stuffing envelopes, and making phone calls. But they are passionate about what they do. They are looking for a reason here in our state to stay in the profession. We've got to protect the $6,000 raise that we worked so hard to secure. After year one, those funds go into the general fund, and so we've got to make sure they're earmarked in year two and beyond. That's pretty much it. Thank you.
My views on teachers haven't changed any. They have, for over a decade, they've been asked to do more with less, and they are very creative in doing that. And most of them have to pull out of their own pockets to do it. I want to give them the funds up front so they don't have to pay out of their pocket. I don't know how many actually it's the only place that I can think of that your employer asks you to go and buy a ream of paper so you can do your work, you know? So, yeah, no, my view on teachers hasn't changed any at all.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hicks, we'll begin these questions with you. Oil and gas have been good to the state, and the state of Oklahoma has been good to oil and gas. The average gross production tax in the region is 7%. If Oklahoma charged 10%, it'd mean $300 million more. Do you support raising the gross production tax to the regional average, and why or why not?
I don't support that, and here's why. I was at a forum, and Gary Jones, who's running for governor, was saying that. He says it's about time that those oil companies paid their fair share. And it's interesting, oil companies don't pay taxes. They pass it on to the consumer. You guys have seen the gas prices go up. As I'm knocking doors, we got a lot of people with fixed incomes. They're complaining about the high gas prices. The idea that raising the gross production tax is going to somehow be a tax just on the oil company, it's not. It's a tax on every one of us in this room. So no, I don't support raising that.
Thank you. Mr. Lee?
I do support raising the gross production tax to the regional average. Oil companies make their decisions on where to drill usually based on a margin of plus or minus 50%. So a roughly 5% increase in taxation won't cost us jobs, and it will provide much needed revenue for us to help fund education, for us to expand Medicaid, and for us to maybe lower taxes in other areas like the income tax. And the deal we made with the oil companies back in the 1990s to lower the gross production tax was never meant to be a permanent deal. We made it a permanent deal. So by raising it, we are doing something responsible and helping improve education, healthcare, and other government services in our state.
I would support raising the gross production tax to 7%. We lowered it back in the 90s to 2% when horizontal drilling was new and it was going to cost us a lot of money to develop that equipment. We stayed that way for a long time. As a product of the teacher walkout, we raised it to 5%. And just 0.5% more would have brought in an additional $60 million into our economy. So yes, to be specific, I do. All the other states around us start at 8.3% and go higher. Oil's not going anywhere. Neither are we. Thank you.
Ms. Carter?
I absolutely support raising the gross production tax to 7%. There's no reason why it should have been 2%, other than at the beginning I can see why it was at 2% because of the cost of starting and all of that. But it's proven that it works. They have a proven system that they use, and there's no way that it should be at 2% or 5%. I think it should be up at 7%. So yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Pinkett?
Absolutely, it should be 7% minimum. even at 7%, that's still the lowest effective tax rate on oil and gas companies in the entire nation. We have 2 large areas in Oklahoma that are drilled. They're called Scoop and Scrape, if I remember correctly, and they're not going anywhere. If any of the large companies, oil companies, are threatening to leave, I can promise you there's enough oil companies around that will come in and be happy to take that oil. And we certainly need to get $300+ million back into the state funds for education.
Okay, we'll begin this question, and we're getting a lot of good questions about education and funding, so I'm going to try to combine some of these, and we'll begin this with Mr. Lee. So a group led by Senator Coburn has proposed to roll back all new taxes. It's probably asked you and others to sign a petition to oppose all new taxes. Have you? Would you sign such a pledge, and why or why not?
I have not signed that pledge, and I won't sign that pledge. To sign that pledge and make that promise not to have any new taxes ever would be to lie to you all. Sometimes we need to be able to raise taxes to fund programs to improve education, healthcare, to improve infrastructure. We need that freedom to do that. And when you give your vote to us, you're trusting that we will do that responsibly. I do promise to be responsible of how we handle taxes. But former Senator Coburn and Oklahoma Taxpayers Unite, what they're trying to do, they are so bogged down in this ideology of never paying taxes that they ignore key services that strengthen our state, like education.
I will not sign the pledge. If you're familiar with what's going on right now it is in the State Supreme Court under review. It's been challenged by several different groups, and if the Supreme Court's line of questioning is any indicator, hopefully it'll be declared unconstitutional just any day now. They're in deliberation. As someone who has literally worked these budgets at the district level, I know that there is no more to give, at least from the school side of things. Thank you very much.
Ms. Mara?
I absolutely will not sign that. There's no reason why you would ask anybody to sign to promise that they will never raise taxes ever. The state legislature and the whole state government is run by revenue, mostly by taxes and a couple other items. And when you cut your revenue, you have to cut your spending as well. That's basic accounting, basic household accounting anyway. So no, I will never sign anything that has to do with that.
I would not sign that pledge. I think it ultimately comes down to you get what you pay for, and anyone that feels that they do not want to have any taxes at all, well, you get in a situation that we have now. In fact, I'd like to start a pledge where we actually support teachers more in the way of providing them better health care options for teachers and their families, provide them better retirement benefits, provide them with better resources for the classroom and smaller class sizes.
Mr. Hicks?
This question about what Tom Coburn and the group Oklahoma Taxpayers Unite are trying to do, there are 2 bills. One is House Bill 1010XX. That was the funding portion of the package. The other bill was the teacher pay raise. That was House Bill 1023XX. I was at a forum at the Republican Women's Luncheon just recently, and Mike Hunter, our Attorney General, was there, and he said that he's already issued an opinion on that those 2 are separated. If what Tom Coburn and that group do, let's say they're successful and they undo the tax, the teacher pay raise will not be affected by that. The legislature will simply have to pay for it out of the general fund, and to our good fortune, there's about $1 billion more in the general fund right now to pay for that. So there is no jeopardy to 10-10-20 or 10-23XX if what Coburn and those guys are doing is successful. So that might clarify if you've heard something other than that.
Okay, we'll begin this questions with Ms. Provenzano. Each session of the Oklahoma legislature seems to be more divisive, and more partisan than the last. What in your background leads us to believe you can go to Oklahoma City and get anything done?
As a school administrator, I work with a wide variety of personalities and opinions and positions. One of the things that is key is to be able to work literally across the aisle. I consider myself a moderate Democrat. If you cannot get along with someone who thinks differently than you do, and if you cannot compromise with someone and find some sort of common ground, you're not a true leader. Oftentimes in teacher teams, I've had lots of ideas come and I felt like I knew what was right, but the consensus of the team was a different path. And you have to be willing to go a different way for the sake of the greater.
Thank you. Ms. Marver?
My background is in accounting, and there's a lot of times where you are working on a problem or a project and you find something's wrong with it, so you have to dig in and dig deep, and a lot of times you have to work with other people in the business, and talking with your supervisor or the CEO or CFO, you have to be able to explain to them what's going on and really dig in and tell them, what you need to convey in a specific way. And to do that, you have to be able to work around a lot. Sorry, stop now.
Yeah, I do that every day in my career now as a realtor. I earn the trust and respect of brand new clients every day, and I have to bring people together for quite a long period of time, usually about 45 to 60 days, and make sure that both sides are congruent with what is happening with the transaction. Now, also as a nursing home administrator, I did that every day as well. I was responsible for coordinating and developing new relationships with physicians, hospitals. I was responsible for making sure 75 employees were happy with their jobs, 75 residents were happy living where they're living, and making sure that the owners were happy as well. So I definitely think that most of my career has been just doing just that. And going back a little further, I spent about 10 years as an umpire, baseball umpire. So if you can imagine the calamities facing an umpire, then you'll understand.
Mr. Hicks.
I've spent the last 30 years working with committees. If you've ever worked with a building committee, you know that it takes a lot of patience. And for example, when we did Centennial Middle School, we met with the teachers because we wanted to design the classrooms the way they wanted it. We met with the coaches. We met with all of the different entities and came up with a building that worked for everybody with very limited budgets. And these are the types of things we're going to face at the state legislature. Working with people and committees to come to solutions that are successful for Oklahoma on very limited budgets. That's the kind of thing I've done for 30 years. And I think my experience in the construction field gives me a unique qualification for this position. We're going to be building roads and bridges, and knowing how contracts and things like that deal with construction work, I think, is important.
So, in my background, I've led sports teams. I was a team captain when I played football in high school. I've worked to help teammates compromise then. I've had to be part of compromising when I played football in college. I work in retail management, so I have to work out compromises every day with my staff. And also, like Ms. Provenzano, I'm a moderate Republican. I'm very centrist in my ideology. I think there's a couple of practical things we can do at the state legislature to make this process a little bit easier. First, I think we should have one session devoted to budget and another session devoted to policy. By doing that, we can keep our focus on budget and for one entire session, our focus on policy for the next. And so compromise is essential to functional government.
Thank you. Ms. Marta will begin these questions with you. And I'm trying to combine some questions here about Oklahomans and the poor health status and rankings, and especially crisis with child welfare and social services. Oklahoma is the third highest in the nation for percentage of people who don't have health insurance. Do you support accepting federal dollars to expand Medicaid, and why or why not?
I absolutely support accepting federal money for expanding Medicaid and Medicare. Those are our tax dollars that go to the federal government, so they should come back to Oklahoma to support our less fortunate that are not able to afford health care. Health care is expensive. I mean, it's straight out. There's a lot of reform that probably needs to happen. But, I mean, we can reform that in Oklahoma and get the suitor care reformed. Unfortunately, as a state legislator, I can't do it, nationally. But I think that if we can provide a good core example, then we can prove that everybody can have it.
Mr. Pickett.
Oklahomans have a higher risk of dying of preventable causes than any other state. So, yes, I absolutely do agree with accepting federal dollars to expand Medicaid. We have high infant mortality rates, and the stats that you provided is really despicable. We have to provide health care for our community and for our children. So, yes.
Mr. Hicks.
I was at a forum recently, and they were talking about this, and they were saying that if you means tested this, and the people who do not qualify were kicked off the rolls, this state would save $80 million a year, is what was proposed. And so I think that what we need to do in this particular area is we need to look at who's receiving this care and do they qualify for it. If they don't qualify for it, the taxpayers of Oklahoma shouldn't be paying for it. The idea of, well, money coming from the federal government is going to save us. Where does that money come from? Is it free? Does it just come falling out of the air? It comes from all of us. The idea that tax money from the federal government somehow doesn't come out of my pocket, that's a foreign concept to me.
Mr. Lee.
Yes, I do think we need to take dollars from the federal government in order to improve and expand Medicaid. We also one of the things we can also do is expand student loan forgiveness programs for those graduated from our state medical schools. We have 2 medical schools in the state. So we can use the loan forgiveness and scholarship program, provided they spend the first 5 to 7 years of their career working with, agreeing to take on low-income patients. And one of the things we can also do is we can try to impose controls on prices of prescription drugs. We can lobby our congressional delegation to fight back on anti-competitive practices by drug companies. Drug prices are too high right now and they need to be lowered. And by leaning on our congressmen, we can hopefully get that done.
We have 160,000 folks in the state of Oklahoma who currently do not qualify for Medicaid coverage, but if we would accept federal dollars, they would. Right now, their doctor is the emergency room. And those costs get passed on to taxpayers. Now, nobody should get turned away from the emergency room. I support that. However, if these families have access to preventative health care, the measures would mean a healthier workforce as well as jobs creation to the tune of about 12 to 15,000 jobs in a growing local economy that costs us, the taxpayer, significantly less over 10 years than in 1 year that we spend luring private industry to our state.
Okay. Begin this question with Mr. Pingleton. Across the nation, mass shootings in schools have made parents afraid to send their kid to school. What are your thoughts and solutions about guns in schools?
I oppose guns in schools when it comes to arming any of the staff or teachers. Teachers are nurturers in nature and not defenders. So first and foremost, we need to make that clear. Teachers should not be put in those positions. I do support a higher discussion, a more involved discussion in what to do for the solution. I've had some, I think some friends and some voters actually mention maybe pulling more resources towards the National Guard so that maybe the National Guard, some of the folks from the Guard can come into the schools to at least as a preventative measure, if anything. But I do agree that we do need to have that conversation as if needed.
Mr. Hicks?
I was listening to one of the governor forums, and Kevin Stitt said that the best defense against a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. And I'll tell you this, we need to harden these targets. The schools, in order to be safe, we need to have a trained police force that is in the school that can defend against such incidents. I mean, I've talked to several people in law enforcement, and they say, yeah, we have all kinds of resources. We could come in there with trained people that can stop such a problem. But to just have the schools with no defense, it invites these kind of problems. So I think a trained force inside the school is a good solution.
Mr. Lee?
I don't think the solution to gun violence in schools is to put guns in the hands of our teachers. I think Mr. Pingleton is right when it comes to teachers are there to nurture and to educate. However, I do think we can improve school security, and we can do that by increasing the number of school resource officers or police officers who are assigned to schools as their primary job. And I think we also need to have a conversation about how we're addressing mental health care issues in our state. No sane person goes and picks up a gun and goes and shoots 30 people in a school. We need to talk about how we can address those problems before they escalate to that level. And improving mental health care and taking a look at how we can do that practically is the first step.
As an educator, I know that we must act to protect our students from what seems like one act of gun violence after another. Right after Santa Fe, I had one of my favorite kids walk up to me and say, "Mrs. P, that won't ever happen here, will it?" And I said, "I'm going to do everything I can to make sure it doesn't." I'm glad that permitless carry was vetoed by the governor. You need a license to buy a car. I'm sorry, to drive a car. You need a food handler's permit to prove that you can safely handle food. The tourism industry agrees, OSBI agrees, 89% of Oklahomans polled agree. I don't believe teachers should be armed. Educators should teach. The role of a school resource officer is to provide safety and security. Thank you.
So the gun violence is a tough subject. I recently went to a Moms Demand Action meeting, and we discussed a lot of things. And I have the Moms Demand Action distinction. So they have said that I am aligned with them on gun safety and common sense gun laws. Our teachers do not need to be armed in the school. Their job is to protect children mentally as well as physically, as far as providing for them. I don't believe that they should have to determine in a stressful situation like that who's the bad guy.
Thank you. Mr. Hicks, we'll begin with you on this question. The Oklahoma Constitution says that the legislature shall establish and maintain a system of free and public schools wherein all the children of the state be educated. Do you believe this includes the children of who are illegal immigrants?
No, I don't. I think it's citizens of the United States, and I don't think it includes immigrants. Right now in Oklahoma, we have about 24,000 students that educate privately in our Christian schools and our private schools. We have 18,000 that use homeschool. 690,000 use public schools. So we have the overwhelming majority of Oklahoma students are using the public system. And as you say, the Constitution says we should provide quality education for our students. But no, I don't think that includes illegal immigrants.
Mr. Lee?
I think we do. Mr. Hicks touched on Christian schools. I myself am a graduate of a Christian school, and I can tell you that Jesus taught to invite the stranger and the immigrant in. I think when it comes to the whole conversation on illegal immigration, we have to recover the humanity that lies within us in order to empathize with these immigrants. We do need to protect our borders. I do believe that. But we need to care about those who are here. And part of that is to educate them.
It's not the role of a school system or a school district to determine or enforce immigration status. It's our role to provide an education. There is even a law that says we can't ask about immigration status. So I firmly believe that those who show up on the door will and should be educated.
Thank you. Ms. Barber?
I believe that anybody who is willing to risk coming into this country illegally, and they bring their children from whatever they brought them from. Obviously, it was something horrible that they came from. Otherwise, they would have gone through proper channels to become a legal immigrant and become a citizen. So as far as us educating their children, if they are willing to allow us to educate their children, I think that we have an obligation to provide that for them.
Yeah, these families risked a lot to get to the U.S. They escaped a lot too. And I feel it's very similar to like if someone were to go to the emergency room, no one should be turned away. When we have children go to school, they should not be turned away.
Thank you. Mr. Lee, we'll begin this comment with you. Oklahoma leads the world in incarcerating women, and among the highest for incarcerating men in America. Why do we do that? And can we do better?
I think we can do better. You know, for decades, we have waged a wrong-headed war on drugs, and that war on drugs turned into a war on those who are suffering from drug addiction. We pack them into our prisons instead of giving them treatment and help. And by doing that, giving them that criminal conviction, we have essentially abandoned them from the legal economy. They are ineligible for assistance in government programs as well for housing, food stamps. And it's almost impossible to get a job when you have to check a box that says, yes, I am a convicted felon. So we can do better. We took a good step in 2016 by passing state questions 780 and 781. But we can and we must do more, and part of it is starting by providing social assistance to those prisoners who are reentering society, and by discontinuing this policy of mass incarceration.
I don't know if you saw in the paper just a few weeks ago, we're now #1 in men and women per capita across the globe. 75% of the folks in our privatized prisons here in the state of Oklahoma are nonviolent offenders. That costs us about $19,000 to $23,000 a year, depending. It's a big chunk of our budget. But what if for a minute we took a look on a case-by-case basis at the folks that are there and tried to determine what it is that they actually need to become successful. Do they need job skills? Do they need mental health support? Do they need wraparound services? And if we provided those things to them at a much lower cost, $2,000 to $3,000 a year, what would happen? Well, I'll tell you what would happen. In Texas and Missouri, they've tried it. They've lowered population size within the prisons, and they've lowered their crime rate.
Thank you. All right.
I absolutely believe that us as Oklahomans can do better as far as the incarceration rate. We need to stop the school to prison pipeline. It's unnerving to think that people are just categorized by what they look like or how they dress, and they're automatically assumed to be on drugs or have a weapon on them or any of that. I think community policing is a big thing that we need to do. We need to implement. I think that will help in lowering the crime, well, the arrest rate. And then I also think that we need to look at other policies to help.
We've already failed these people. Punitive laws, overzealous prosecutors, non-standardized sentencing has put 21,000 people who are non-violent criminals behind prison, and it's unacceptable. We need to do all we can to help them engage back into society, get a job, get back into their family, their home lives, and be a part of society. When they're a part of society, you're looking at more people who are going to pay sales tax, more people who will pay income tax, and hopefully property taxes. And what does that do? That reverses the trend of spending $200 million more a year on prisoners and instead taking in $200 million. So it could essentially be costing us about $400 million total from the state budget.
Last Thursday, I was coming up a driveway of a lady that I had talked to about a month ago, and she came walking out. She's probably in her 30s. She has a felony on her record and has great difficulty getting a job. And she said, "Mr. Hicks, let me tell you the story." She smuggled a pack of cigarettes into a friend in prison. And so now she has a felony and can't get a job, okay? Well, here's the problem in Oklahoma. We are bound by the law. The law is the law. If you commit a crime that is a felony, you get charged with a felony. So what's the solution? The solution is, if you want to review the law and have lawmakers change the law, then that's how you get there. You don't just decide who's going to be a good person and who's going to be a bad person. The law is the law. So the solution in Oklahoma is, if you don't like the law, change the law and change the sentencing.
Ms. Provenzano, we'll start with you on this one. One issue that's been discussed for years is school vouchers. Are school vouchers a good thing or a bad thing, and why?
Okay. I do not support the public spending of public tax dollars on a private school education. That's it.
Ms. Carter?
So school vouchers they essentially, what they do is they take your tax dollars, they put it all in a pool, and then you're getting a voucher, and you can take that voucher and take it to whatever school you want to take your child to. Could be private, could be public. And essentially what we're doing is we're taking the public money that's funding our schools, taking away more from those schools. and giving it to a private institution. And I do not support that.
The voucher system was created essentially after all of the good and all of the positive things of public education was squeezed out of it. So if we reverse that system and take away those opportunities, make sure that those public dollars are not spent in any way towards a voucher system, and instead fund education the way it should be properly, provide high-quality education with high-quality teachers, then we won't even have this discussion.
Today, there are roughly 26 voucher programs around the country in about 15 states. And those states include Florida and Ohio and Indiana. Actually, Indiana has about 100,000 students are using a system to get out of the inner city trouble challenged schools and get a good education. They're using school choice. Some people say it's successful. It's an interesting topic to look at. Now, private school administrators, I have a dear friend, Dennis Queen, who at Mingo Valley Christian School, and he said, I would never accept vouchers for this reason. With vouchers come government strings. They're going to tell us what we can and cannot teach. And so there are private school interests that say we don't want the vouchers. So this is a topic that school choice is a topic I find very interesting. If we can provide a better education, but it's got pros and cons, and it's something that needs to be studied.
Stop.
I'm opposed to school vouchers in Oklahoma. They drain funding from public schools. Instead of draining that funding, let's make public schools worth attending in this state. We need better teachers, we need better facilities, we need better textbooks, and we need to give those schools and those teachers the funding that they need and deserve. And so I think if we start today and we work hard at it, I think in 10 years we can be a national leader in education. So let's make that our goal. Let's make that how we determine our success as a state. Let's make that what we're fighting for. Let's be a national leader in education.
Ms. Marta, we'll begin this round of questions with you. While there are many good candidates on this ballot and on all the ballots on June 26th, many Oklahomans are going to the polls to vote for or against medical marijuana. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts on medical marijuana is that there's a lot of good things with the medical marijuana. The CBD oil is obviously, it helps a lot of people and is actually legal in Oklahoma at the moment. As far as the smoking of the medical marijuana, I do support including that as to help reduce the opioid crisis that is going on. It has been proven in several studies that it has helped.
Mr. Bingham.
Yeah, I agree with the medical marijuana measure. I think our state has historically faced an opioid problem, and with that said, when we have ancillary professionals who are prescribing marijuana instead of type 2 prescriptions, we're going to have quite a serious overturn in such the opioid epidemic. So I don't think we need to think of it as a funding measure necessarily, as more of a healthcare measure. We need to focus on what it's going to do for the healthcare industry and all the people that are suffering that from whether it's seizures or pain or whatever it is. I think every single one of us probably have someone that we know that this would benefit.
Mr. Hicks.
If the question is about medical marijuana, that's one question. If the question is about State Question 788, that is an entirely different question. The question that's being put before voters, this is not medical marijuana. This is written so loosely that in every other state they have listed the conditions you'd have to qualify to get this. In Oklahoma, it's completely open-ended. Actually, Mary Fallon was on the radio today saying they're going to have to do a special session if this passes because they're going to have to clean this up. This thing is a mess. So if the question is about State Question 788, this is not medical marijuana, and I would not vote for it.
Mr. Lee.
So with regards to State Question 788, we do need to have, I do support it to an extent. I think we do need to have a better regulatory system in place, and we do need to treat this like a potentially addictive substance. It does have some addictive properties to it, although it does have medicinally useful properties. We should treat it like we would, say, tranquilizers, for example. Although medical marijuana does have some unique uses in treatment, though, such as treating seizures, providing better relief to patients with neuropathic pain, and providing relief to patients suffering from the side effects of chemotherapy. So I do support medical marijuana, but I think State Question 788 needs some work with regards to making it more, making a better regulatory system.
So I met the gentleman who co-authored this proposal. He has a child who's missing 80% of his brain. And the physician that he goes to says, in order for us to prescribe medication, pain medication for this, you have to be able to document that you have 50 seizures a day. Hence his efforts. My grandmother passed away from Parkinson's disease, and I've seen someone with Parkinson's be able to hold a spoon after 30 seconds of using a medically approved marijuana. Yes, it does need regulation. If it passes, the legislature has 30 days to come together and define the scope and policy. They can do this. We have states that have done this. We have examples of regulations and policy that are working well that we could borrow from.
Thank you. Mr. Pickleton, we'll begin this one with you, and thank you for a lot of good questions on taxation here from this crowd as well. The legislature and governor say the state's broke. Oklahoma's cut the top income tax rate by nearly 25% since 2004. Do you believe this has contributed to our current budget shortfall? Do you support restoring top income tax rates, or find another way to fund government?
I think there are better ways to fund government, but because we haven't increased income tax in, say, 30 years, we do kind of have to have that discussion. I would support first and foremost increasing the oil and gas to 7%. I would also support first, before raising income taxes, support eliminating the capital gains tax. We're losing about $475 million in our state budget because of that tax. And I also support reducing some of the incentives for large companies who have been around for a while and are still receiving those benefits. You put all that together, and we most likely do not need to do anything about income taxes.
I disagree with the statement that the state of Oklahoma is broke. We're not a poor state. We're a poorly managed state. And what I'm telling you, we have been in an economic downturn. In my profession, the bottom fell out. You talk about not having pay raises. I'm making the same dollar figure I made 10 years ago. It's starting to come back. We're having a strong recovery. By the end of the year, we're going to be $1 billion ahead of where we were last year. Now, if you want to stall out a recovery, the worst thing, what you do is you tax it. Taxation is not the answer. Now, here's a solution. $700 million. Would you like to have $700 million more? Cap the wind energy, okay? Rather than raise taxes, we let the wind, $70 million a year for 10 years is going to flow out of the state of Oklahoma, and we could have capped it, but 23 of our legislators said, don't cap it, okay? 19 said, let's cap it. Somebody's got control of our legislation.
Stop.
So to an extent, I think it has contributed to our lack of revenue. We're also victims of an economy dependent on oil. When the oil market took a downturn, so did our state revenue. So we do need explore alternative taxation options, but we also need to look at diversifying our economy and to more stable energies like the tech industry, instead of being so reliant on oil and natural gas. And I think we should eliminate the wind energy tax credits. I think we can look at eliminating the capital gains tax credit. I think it's less about raising taxes and more about eliminating some rather irresponsible foul and error tax credits. And we do also need to have a more efficient government. I think one example of that is Department of Human Services. We can streamline that agency. We can streamline other agencies to run more efficiently.
First three things that I take a hard look at. The gross production tax does need to be raised to 7%. Like I said, right now, we raised it to 5%, and just a 0.5% more would infuse $60 million more into our economy. The capital gains deduction that is currently taken by the top 800 wage earners here in the state, those folks that make $1 million or more a year, was meant to serve as a trickle-down approach to taking this $465 million and infusing it into our economy. That hasn't happened, so I support eliminating that capital gains deduction. Beyond that, State Question 640, Senate Bill 640, that requires a 75% supermajority for any revenue-raising measure, has crippled our state for the last several years. We need to take action to eliminate that from the books.
I believe that I would look at a lot of what is being taxed. I do believe that one of the problems was that the tax cut that was done on the top earners, and then when we were in a shortfall, it triggered another tax cut, which made it worse. I do believe that we should look into raising that back up, even if it's 0.25%. So yeah, I think we need to look at that.
Okay. Begin this question with Mr. Hicks. Once again, the legislature passed a bill to try to allow a monument to the Ten Commandments on Capitol grounds. The state Supreme Court said no. In 2016, the voters said no. The state has spent millions in court to do this. Do you support putting a Ten Commandments monument on Capitol grounds or separation of church and state, and why?
Well, I don't think that's the first job of a state legislator, but I don't have a problem with the Ten Commandments being on state property. How many of you have been to Washington, D.C.? I mean, there's a picture of George Washington kneeling in prayer and a Bible verse right there in the rotunda, okay? This is part of our heritage, so I don't have a problem with it. Now, I've been asked by people, well, is that what you're going to spend all your time doing? I think the main job of the representative is to do the budget. That's our job, okay? We're not going to do those things at the expense of getting the budget done. But I don't have any problem, and this whole concept of separation of church and state, it's found nowhere in the Declaration of Independence. It's found nowhere in the Constitution. It was a statement made by Thomas Jefferson to the Danbury Baptists to assure them that government would never interfere in religious matters. Has nothing to do with the Ten Commandments on state grounds.
Mr. Lee.
I have no problem with the Ten Commandments a monument being on state grounds. I do think we need to stop spending so much time and energy and our state resources fighting this battle. Let's put it up. Let's keep it up. Let's move on to something else. I think the primary job of a representative is to do the will of the people. And so I do believe in a proper separation of church and state. I think that's important to not only keep us, I think it's most important to keep the government from interfering with the free exercise of religion, and it also protects us from forcing a singular religious doctrine on an entire state. That's the importance of separation of church and state. But I think the Ten Commandments battle is a battle that we need to stop fighting. We need to spend our time focusing on things that matter, like fixing education, healthcare, and infrastructure.
Ms. Provenzano.
I agree. As an educator, school leader, we work hard to be inclusive and respectful of all of the different children that come to us as well as their families, and make sure that we honor their personal belief system. At the beginning of every day, we have a moment of silence for students to worship as they see fit or to choose not to. I'd extend that belief system into the legislative body. I don't believe it's the role of legislators to legislate morality.
Ms. Marlowe.
So the Ten Commandments is a wonderful guideline for a person to live by. I won't deny that. Does it need to be on the state capitol? No, I don't think it does. I believe that putting the Ten Commandments up shows favoritism towards one religion over another, and I don't believe that it should be on our state capitol.
Well, I think this is a federal issue, so we're definitely spinning our wheels for not. The Supreme Court has already ruled a couple of times that having religious doctrine on public grounds is indeed flowing into not separating church and state, whereas those Supreme Court decisions ruled the Founding Fathers did intend for the separation of church and state. That's essentially should be no-brainer, case closed, no more discussion. Having said that, that does not put any restrictions or on allowing education facilities to allow open and freedom of religious activities.
Okay. Thank you. This is kind of a tricky question, so begin with Mr. Lee. A number of questions about social services, including DHS and child welfare, and also questions about infrastructure that says 17% of all bridges in the state are structurally deficient. Education, infrastructure, and social services like DHS. You can't do all three. How do you rank those, top to bottom? Infrastructure, education, social services, and why?
Well, that is a tricky question. From top to bottom, I think education has to be my top. And here's, well, I'll go somewhat on each why. Education's the silver bullet to all the rest. With education comes the ability for us to properly achieve the other ones. After education, social services. It's important that we take care of those who in our society can't take care of themselves, and to offer our assistance when we can and do that responsibly. And after that, infrastructure. We need strong infrastructure in the state. I think a big part of infrastructure is not only fixing our roads and bridges, but also exploring options in public transit so we can reduce those costs further over time by having less cars and trucks on the road.
I would do education, social services, and infrastructure, but the three are so very close. Education for obvious reasons, but social services marry. When I was a principal in Tulsa Public Schools, I gave Family and Children's Services in Day Spring a room at the school because you couldn't do one without the other in a high poverty, 100% free and reduced school. If a kid is having a bad day, the goal is to get their high school diploma, but they don't want to conjugate a verb if their electricity just got cut off or their dad just got arrested or they had to move in the middle of the night. So we would pull them out and get them the social services that they needed, get them stable, but then get them back to the classroom. Since 2015, regarding infrastructure, in education, we've taken money from transportation. We don't want to do that anymore. Transportation needs its own budget, as do we. We don't want to beg, borrow, and steal from one another.
Ms. Barber?
So my putting those in order is education, social services, and infrastructure. Education is pretty much key for anybody to be able to become whatever they want to be. And social services is close second. If you're hungry or you don't have a roof over your head, or those are pretty tied for me. Infrastructure is my third option because that's a really tough question. I'm sorry. The infrastructure is important as well, but I believe that the education and health, social services is just slightly more important.
Mr. Pickett.
Yeah, just to answer the question, I would rate them education, social services, then infrastructure. But honestly, if we consider as a state standing together and fighting for what the state needs, we don't have to rate them. We can put them in piecewise solutions if we actually provide long-term sources of sustainable funding by some of the options that I mentioned earlier, increasing GPT, and removing the capital gains exemptions, and removing the incentives for large corporations. Education is the foundation, but unless you're healthy, obviously that's not going to matter. And if you can't get to the school, it's not going to matter either. So we need to just stand together and fight for the funding.
Mr. Hicks.
You know, there was a time when the churches took care of a lot of the social services. It wasn't big government that did all that, but putting these in order, I would put them in order as infrastructure, good roads, bridges, the infrastructure, but what also is included in that infrastructure is the school buildings, like the building we're standing in. As someone who designs schools, that is infrastructure, okay? And so those are kind of mixed. So I would put it infrastructure first, I would put education second, and I would put social services as third. And I know that many of our churches are still doing a lot of that and picking up where the government can't provide everything.
Okay. We're going to go to a lightning round where I hope you all can have one-word answers.
Okay.
And we'll begin with Ms. Provenzano on this,
Oh, boy.
and then we'll
It's going to be a
have,
great word.
did you support the 2018 teacher walkout?
Yes.
Yes.
Ms. Marder.
100%.
No.
Yes.
We'll begin with Ms. Marder for this question. Again, one-word answers. What should be the minimum wage?
At least $13 an hour.
Plus.
Whatever the market demands.
Something that keeps up with the cost of living.
Cost of living.
Okay, these are not one-word answers. So we'll begin with Mr. Pickleton. Should Oklahoma make it easier to vote?
Yes.
Mr. Hicks.
I like where we are. I like the way it is now, where the ID is required.
Okay?
No.
Yes, we should. Yes, we should make it easier to vote.
Absolutely.
Ms. Marder.
100%.
Okay, we'll begin, let's start with Mr. Hicks, I believe. Do you believe in climate change?
I don't believe human beings are the cause of that.
Mr. Lee?
97% of scientists agree, so yes, I do.
Yes.
Yes.
Science.
Mr. Lee? Do you believe women should have reproductive freedom?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
This is a complicated
One more.
question.
Okay.
I don't believe in abortion.
Okay. We are going to go to our closing arguments, closing comments. So we're going to have 2 minutes from each candidate. And we're going to begin with Ms. Marder. We're going to go this direction from here. So, Ms. Marder, you have 2 minutes.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight. It's a Tuesday, so thanks for taking the time away from your family and giving us your time. I will do everything in my power to work as hard as possible to give the House District 79 what is required. I will listen to anybody that wants to talk to me. Whether I agree with them or not, I am all ears. I love having conversations with people that I don't agree with, because it opens my eyes to what they're going through and how they feel about a certain situation. I think it's important, and I will do my best to represent all of you and everybody in House District 79.
I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum, as well as everyone here who came out to be a part of this process to find out more about your candidates for House District 79. I hope we helped you make some decisions and deepen your thinking about the issues that matter to you. As the educator in the race, I feel like I know what's needed and possess the experience and leadership skills to get the job done. We've got to make education funding and reform our #1 priority, followed by healthcare, mental health care, and criminal justice reform. Healthy, productive citizens, contributing citizens of Tulsa is our goal. The role of a school administrator means building a healthy culture and climate. It means providing support, making hard choices, balancing countless budgets, and using data strategically to drive decisions that impact the broader people that you serve. It's time for me to expand that supportive leadership role to the citizens of Tulsa. If you'd like to visit with me after the forum, I'll stay behind and answer questions for you as long as it takes. Thank you.
Mr. Lee.
First off, thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting tonight. Thank you all for coming out to hear what we have to say. I think it's important that engaged citizens make informed choices, and you all are definitely engaged citizens. So I want to wrap up. I believe we can make education, we can be a national leader in education here in Oklahoma. I think it's the key to growing our economy, and a growing economy, I think in 10 years we can be one of those top 10 states. We as people deserve good health care. I think we can expand Medicaid to help the poorest Oklahomans achieve health care. We can be smart on crime. We can reduce mandatory minimums, and we can lower our prison population, implement policies that are intelligent and thoughtful and forward-thinking. I believe running this campaign has shown me that Oklahomans are wonderful people who always rally to help their neighbors. In our lowest moments, we always come together. Tulsans rushed to Oklahoma City in 1995 to help victims of the Oklahoma City bombing. Musicians held a concert from all over the state to support and rebuild more after the F5 tornado. When 10 basketball players and Oklahoma State University officials died in a plane crash, members of the University of Oklahoma were some of the first to offer condolences. We can conquer our current problems in the state. We can and we must do better, and we need to have solutions that look forward, not just to the next year, but forward to the next decade and even into the next century. We set up a bright, prosperous Oklahoman, not just for ourselves, but for all Oklahomans who come after us. Thank you for tonight, and I hope you will support me 1 week from tonight.
Mr. Hicks.
About a year and a half ago, I went to Weldon Watson. He's a friend of mine. And I asked him, I said, Weldon, I want to be a good representative. What do I need to do? And he said, you need to visit about 4,000 people. So I got started on that. And what I'm learning by talking to people in our district is Oklahomans are fundamentally conservative. They do not expect a lot out of government, but there's a few things they do expect. They expect good roads and bridges, good infrastructure. That's a function of government, and we should provide that. They expect law enforcement to be safe, effective. They want strong law enforcement. That's a function of government. And all of them want a vibrant, growing economy. Now, that's not a role of government, but government can get out of the way and let that happen, and we're actually seeing a very strong recovery, which will help with education funding and everything else. And then they want strong, quality education for Oklahoma's children. And as we said, there are 24,000 doing it with private school, there's 18,000 homeschool, there's 690,000 kids in Oklahoma with public school. And we need to do a good job with that, and I believe that we can fund it. I agree with Todd Lamb. I think we need to put 65% of every education dollar into the classroom. And we can do that by streamlining administrative function, controlling spending, and we can pay teachers as the professionals they are without raising taxes. Oklahomans don't want to raise taxes, and we don't have to. When you're having a recovery, the worst thing you could do is start raising taxes. That would stall it out. We need this recovery to continue in order to fund all of these things, and I think we can do it without raising taxes.
I have 4 kids still in public school, 6 years until they graduate. So I can promise you I'm deeply concerned and extremely committed to making sure that this state does better sooner rather than later. We can actually do that by putting people over profit. And we can start by creating a legislation that actually values the worth of people. And that starts with having a balanced and responsible tax system. I want to be a part of the solution. And I have advocated for people of all ages throughout my entire career, and I continue to do so, and I would love to advocate for you and District 79. Oscar Wilde said, "To live is the rarest thing in the world. Most people exist. That is all." What is Oklahoma doing? Existing? I don't want to just exist. I want to thrive. I'm sure you all do too, right? I mean, that's probably why you're here. But I promise you, at the end of the day, if we all stand up for the same cause and stand together, we can see prosperity and growth return to Oklahoma so we can have a happier, healthier state. In fact, I encourage all of you, when you leave here, to go home, tell everyone you know what you heard, the candidate you're voting for, and why this election is so important. Thank you very much. You can go to my website, brianforoklahoma.com. You can also go to my Facebook page, Brian for OK, and I'll stay behind and answer any questions.
Thank you to each of the candidates. Let's give them a round of applause for their participation. Some reminders about voting. The primary election is next Tuesday, June 26th. Early voting this year is on Thursday, Friday, from 8 to 6 at the election board and at Hardesty Library. Also Saturday from 9 till 2. So we have plenty of opportunities for early voting this year. Sample ballots are now posted on the Tulsa County Election Board website. Be sure that your voter ID or an Oklahoma Election Board or government-issued photo ID. If you have neither of these, you can vote with a provisional ballot. We encourage you all to check out vote411.org. It is a league product that has personalized ballots on the and also we've asked candidates questions. They are not edited in any way for spelling or content by the league. It's a very useful tool for educating people. Again, thank you for attending tonight's forum. We are adjourned.